The Unemployment Insurance Fund last week opened applications for workers affected by the week-long July unrest. The fund will also cater for employees whose employers were not previously registered with the UIF. Employees whose income was affected after their place of work was destroyed during the unrest in KwaZulu-Natal will also receive some kind of assistance here. And for this conversation, we speak then to Advocate Mziyawa, who is the acting UIF Commissioner. Good evening to you, and thank you so much for your time this evening. Let's talk about these applications. How many have you had so far?
Well, in the last count, we have about 1,000, and the list is growing. Yeah, that's the number, Bongi. Good evening, and good evening to you and your viewers.
All right, thank you so much. And let's talk then about how it's all going to work. What factors are you taking into account here when those applications are trickling in?
Well, what we are taking into account is particularly whether those applications are from businesses and employers who are affected by the unrest in the sense of being in the areas concerned and complying with the directive. And the second one, we want to make sure that indeed the employees for whom the applications are made are truly employees of those companies. Those are the two major things that we are double-checking.
And I see that there's also an amount that you've reached as a flat rate. How much is this, and how was this amount then decided upon?
Well, the amount that has been decided is 3,500. The directive, as negotiated with partners at NEDLEC, had made an option between what we call a sliding scale, which takes into account what the individual person's salary was and put it into the UIF formula, or a flat rate in circumstances where it may be seen to be financially viable to do that. We arrived at that amount sourcing from the directive, but we also called our board. There is a board in terms of the UIF Act, which advises the minister on in terms of the law, schemes that are aimed at these kinds of interventions. So considering that the applications for the other tiers are still open, and considering equally that when the benefits were increased to include parental, surrogate, and those others, and we're still having to pay those, and considering that this may not have been the in terms of tears and COVID, we are still told that some waves may be on the way. It was then seen as would be prudent, particularly also in this one for the unrest. As you correctly said in your introduction, we also covered those employees for whom we had no contributions because their employers had not as yet registered them. That at least the amount then must be put into a flat rate.
And how long is this assistance going to last for? I mean, given the fact that some businesses may be able to recover in, let's say, maybe 3 to 6 months, while others could take a little longer for them to recover.
Well, so far the directive itself does not put an end date. It says it may be terminated by gazette through the minister. So it's precisely on the points that we are raising that we are not yet really aware how much it may cost and for how long some of the companies may be back at business. But our thinking so far and our systems are geared towards between July, when this occurred, and December. If financial resources make us to bring that period forward and stop it shorter than December, we may have to do so. If finances permit us and we may have to go beyond that, I'm sure that is a matter that can be discussed. But it should be remembered that we said for this unrest, the other tiers that we are paying since March 2020, the budget that is set aside is 5.3 billion. So in as far as that money gets depleted, it may be a determiner as to whether we shall go longer than December or shorter.
I wonder, then when we look into this particular, system, we cannot look at it in isolation from what we saw in the previous disbursement of the relief that, during the pandemic, that were those relief, measures that were tabled even by the minister. There were some executives that were put on suspension on how they handled the disbursement of these funds that were meant for those who were meant to benefit during the height of COVID-19, looking at last year even, and money that found its way into civil servants, people that were not even supposed to be receiving this money. I wonder how is that investigation going? Do you have any latest developments for us?
Well, yes, the investigation for some of them has been completed, and they are undergoing some disciplinary processes because in their respect, that's what the investigation recommended. And there are some where the investigation recommended no disciplinary action because there was no wrong, so to speak, found, and those colleagues are back at work and they are working.
And I wonder then, is the system fixed, and are you confident that we're not going to find ourselves in this position with the 3,500 rands then, where you are having civil servants and people who are not eligible, some prisoners, being the recipients of this money?
Well, our executives, we even had a meeting yesterday. Our executives are working very hard together with me, of course, to close those gaps. We know some people would like us to pay the next minute. We understand where they come from. But equally, the good point that you are raising is a serious matter that we must have our eyes fixed on because truly this money is meant for people who got this problem. It's not some kind of Christmas or a free for all, and we are moving fast, slowly, with a view to make sure that indeed nobody who should not be paid this money gets paid. We have systems revamped to work with all those who are in DPSA, the Public Service Administration, and PESALs, and our system seems to be picking that very well. Our Auditor General South Africa, gave us a report last week, which gave us a confidence that indeed that system is in order. We're working with Home Affairs. There's still a thing or two that we want to double check with Home Affairs. It does appear from the Auditor General report last week that there's some time lapse between when we get some information about whether this person is alive or not and when ultimately Home Affairs gets to know or gets to update their systems that in fact this person is no longer alive. So we're having discussions there so that we close that gap. We're in constant touch with the correctional services and SASSA so that we're closing those gaps. We have not yet ticked all the lines and so on, and we are hard at that. One of the steps we're going to take, as our board had resolved, precisely on the good point that you are raising, that before we pay a cent this time around, let's call the board, take them through what we have done, including certificates that shall have been independently done by our internal audit, independently done by our internal risk audit, both as to whether our systems are alive to the points you are raising and they are fit to cap all those kinds of dodgy things. So as I'm saying, we're moving fast, very slowly, precisely that the money must go to no other hand than the hand for which it is meant. We hope that we shall be a lot more different than we were the last time.
And I wonder, 2 weeks ago, there's just under 100, employees who are from the aviation sector who marched to your offices demanding payments, and you laid the blame squarely on employers that are not following process and procedures. What is the latest with that particular situation, and how are you remedying it?
Well, we're working very well with NUMSA. We want to really congratulate them. And not only congratulate them, but say that, as they would say in management practices, best practice needs to be spread. We had a session with NETLEC last week where we said what we are doing with NUMSA, we're also doing with SACTU. SACTU did it very beautifully without necessarily making a march, but they were able to take the feedbacks from our system to say these ones and these ones are not paid for this and the other reason. Do this and the other for it to be solved. And the General Secretary of SACTU, Mr. Krill, is leading their team, including all their General Secretaries in the various provinces, working with our teams and they're troubleshooting this, and we're working very well in that space. Same now with NOMSA and many others for that matter who are beautiful, quiet people but focused on solutions. So what we did with NOMSA, as we said last time, was to show them indeed that the non-payment is not occasioned by UIF. We have communicated with the employers. We understand this is a new system. None of us have been involved in a COVID type and mass payments and billions in no time. And the mechanisms that we designed on communication are technological. People are used to talk like we do. And so sometimes they don't see the messages or they doesn't immediately. Their default position is not to go for the messages in the system. Sometimes the messages are not as clear as we would have loved them to be. But we talked with NEDLEC and we're giving that list for all the leaders in that space, be it for business or for unions, to go for their own people, because they've got people on the ground, to talk to the individual companies, correct that. That's what we did with NOMSA. We gave them what was causing the non-payments. We asked them to give us the full UIF reference numbers for those companies that they did not have. And we've already given back to them that this is the other that you must do, and they're working on that. I'm confident they are very speedy themselves, and our own guys really rose to the occasion, and I want to congratulate them. They quickly gave them the feedback. They were on the same understanding now of what needs to be done, and they are fitting in NOMSA, and we think that shall be over in no time.
All right, Tatiawa, in 10 seconds, we're out of time. The UIF is cash-strapped. We've heard this repeatedly said to Parliament. Do you think that there might be a time when you ask for a bailout?
No, we are not really cash-strapped. We are not. We are not abundant equally, but I don't think that we shall be talking bailouts. We are responsibly managing the affairs.
All right. Thank you so much for your time this evening. That was Advocate Mzi Yawa, the acting UIF Commissioner. And just